My name is Andrew, and today we're going to configure the KonaSearch app we just installed in our org. If you have not yet installed KonaSearch in your org, you can download it from the App Exchange. If you need help, you can visit konasearch.com/resources, where you will find an installing KonaSearch video just like this one. Before we begin, two requirements I should mention. One, the person who is configuring KonaSearch, I'm assuming it's you, must have full system administrator profile privileges for KonaSearch to work. This is necessary for security reasons I'll explain in a moment. Number two, please turn off any pop-up blocker that may be running in your browser. This is required for Salesforce's authentication procedure. Configuring KonaSearch takes about 10 minutes and involves 4 steps. Number 1, selecting the Lightning or Classic version of the app. 2, authenticating the connection between your org and your Kona index. 3, selecting the objects you want to search. And 4, indexing the records for these objects so you can search them. Let's log into our org. Okay, step 1, selecting the app. I like to move KonaSearch up on the app menu so I can see it in the drop-down. I also like to hide the version of the app used for Classic since we're in Lightning. Of course, if we were still in Classic, we would hide the Lightning version instead. To do this, go to Setup, search for App menu. There it is. Click it. Scroll to the KonaSearch apps. The app with the small text is for Classic, so I'll hide it. The app with the Kona logo is for Lightning. I'll move it up near the top of the list. And here you can see it in 4th place. Let's go to the KonaSearch app. Step 2, authentication. Before you can search your data, it has to be indexed somewhere. Kona provides you with your own index to do this. But first, you must authenticate the connection between your org and this index. This is one of our many security measures that ensure the safety and privacy of your data. Remember earlier I mentioned that you had to be a sysadmin user. Well, here is where it counts. The authentication process attaches this user account to the KonaSearch app to give the app the privileges it needs to carry out its tasks, like indexing data, for example. If the user account can't see a certain object's records, then neither will KonaSearch. Let's begin. If the KonaSearch page is not showing, click the Configuration tab. You'll notice how authentication is literally the only thing you can do right now in KonaSearch. Well, there's one other option, Advanced Features, that you see here. We'll explain these later in the Advanced section of this video. Let's click the Authenticate button. Next, click on the Allow button to allow your index and org to talk to each other. Now that we're authenticated, the full set of configuration options appear. The main search page defines the UI template for your search pages. The default is Lightning, and we'll leave it this way. If you were using the Classic version of the app, the default main search page would be a Classic template. The Locale defines the default language for your data using the standard 2-character language code. Although we can search multiple languages in an index, setting the default language helps improve search accuracy since presumably most of the data is in this language. EN is for English, but you could, for example, change it to JA for Japanese. We'll discuss virtual fields in our Building a Search Page video. The index update frequency determines how often KonaSearch incrementally updates the index. We'll see this as our last step in the configuration. Max apex job size and max apex jobs at one time are really only changed if you have a very, very busy Apex job queue and you don't want KonaSearch to hog all the activity. The max job size limits the size of any one Apex job, and the max jobs at one time limits how many of the 5 queues KonaSearch can use at the same time. For this org, we don't need to change these parameters, but in general, we try to be a polite app that works well with others. Advanced and unreleased features will be discussed in the Advanced section of our session at the end. We didn't really actually change anything this time, but click the Save Configuration button anyway to save your configuration. Step 3, selecting your objects. Let's click on the Object Setup tab. Here is where you select the objects you want to search. Don't worry if you're not sure of all of them. You can always return at any time and remove an object or add more. KonaSearch will update the index accordingly. KonaSearch lets you index any object supported in the Salesforce platform, including custom objects, standard objects, knowledge base articles, chat or Q&A, and objects from other packaged apps. You can see them in the drop-down here. Our org is really simple. In fact, it's Salesforce's standard default configuration, so there are no packaged apps other than KonaSearch. We've decided that our first search page will search opportunities. As part of the opportunity, we want to include information from other objects. I am selecting opportunity, and the other objects we want to include are account, contact, and product. Oh, and we also want to search any attached files. All of these objects, including the files, will be searched as part of the opportunity object. Let's save our configuration. Notice the other columns on the page. Use the chatter column if you want to include chatter feeds from any of your objects. You can include all of them by clicking here. Use the exclude text areas column if you want to avoid indexing any text area fields. This is sometimes used to run a fast index. Use excluded fields to exclude specific fields from the index. This is useful for fields that contain information you don't want the search to find. For example, personal notes, information that would compromise the accuracy of the search. You exclude fields by moving them from the left panel to the right panel. By the way, in our session, How to Build a Search Page, you'll see that you can also exclude fields by filtering them out at query time. But if you're always filtering out a field, it's more efficient to remove it at index time because then it's excluded once rather than for every query. We're not going to exclude any fields at this time. We use the last modified date field to determine when a record needs to be reindexed. If the LMD is later than the last index date, it means the record needs to be reindexed. However, there are apps that practice lazy opens, which is opening records for read-write rather than read-only when no updates actually happen. The effect on Kona is frequently reindexing huge volumes of records that don't actually change. If you find this happening, a custom date field can be used instead of the LMD, but you will need to implement the logic that determines when the custom field should be updated. Finally, a word of caution. An object that has a lot of records, millions perhaps, can take a long time to index, so be thoughtful when selecting these objects. For example, unselecting an object, saving the setup, and then reselecting it again a short time later will reindex the entire set of records for this object. Step 4, our final step, indexing the records. Click the Status tab. This page shows you where you are in your indexing process. The table you see here lists the objects you selected in Object Setup, as well as the system objects that define all the user's permissions. Users, groups, roles, role hierarchies, sharing rules, and permission sets are all included. The reason we include all of these is because we resolve the permissioning with every query. If you can't see the record in Salesforce, you won't be able to see it in your search results. Resolving the permissioning in the search engine itself has a lot of advantages. For example, fully accurate record counts. Let's get the indexing started. This is the first time we're indexing this org, so we'll click the Upload All Objects button. Upload All Objects indexes everything in your object list. The indexing runs in the background and will keep running until all the records are indexed. It varies how long it takes. A small org like this will index everything in 15 minutes. But an org with millions of records could take days for the first initial index. Of course, incremental indexing only indexes changes since the last index after the initial run, so volumes are a lot smaller. Anyway, notice the second table appears under Upload Job Status, showing the indexing process as it happens. Well, it shows the first snapshot. To get an update, click the Refresh button, like so. For those of you interested in the details of what is happening here, these are Apex jobs, watch the Advanced section at the end of this tutorial. Now, you don't have to click the refresh button every time. You can just click the Start Auto Refresh button and it updates the screen every 5 seconds. While we're indexing, why don't we take a look at some of the other buttons on this page? If you don't want to wait until the next indexing cycle, you can click the Upload Changes button and index now. Let's say you need to reindex a particular object. This will happen for a number of reasons. For example, if you add a formula field and you want to search its values. That's what the Upload Selected Objects button is for. Lastly, if something happens in the org that requires you halt all of your Apex jobs, then click the Stop Processing button and Kona will cancel all of your jobs. Don't worry, that data will go missing from the index. Kona always knows where it is left off. Let's look at the progress now. Notice the volume numbers. Is that one record at a time we're seeing? No. These are batches of records. Very small objects like sharing rules index 200 records per batch. Standard, custom, and packaged app objects index 50 records per batch. And file-based records like the attachment object in Classic and content version in Lightning index 20 records per batch. While we continue indexing here, we have one last step to perform. Remember earlier we mentioned the index update frequency on the configuration page? Here it is. We can set this to 10, 30, or 60 minutes, but everyone sets it to 10. This means every 10 minutes, Kona will wake up and see what has changed, collect it all, and push it out to the index. This all runs in the background, so you don't have to do anything. Let's discuss the last two tabs. Studio is a graphic tool for building your search pages. We have a separate session completely dedicated to building KonaSearch pages. The KonaSearch tab opens our System Administrator search page. This page makes no assumption of the data other than simply to display it. It shows all the records for all your objects that are selected under the Object Setup tab. We'll discuss this in much more detail in Understanding KonaSearch Pages. This ends our session for today. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions or comments, please contact us at info@konasearch.com or help@konasearch.com.